This is a 2020 Mazda MX5 with the 181 brake horsepower 2-litre engine. I've owned it since new. I've done over 36,000 miles in it. 2,805 of those miles have been on track. It's done 20 track days, and I've had my first major bill. The quote was over £2,800, and that wasn't from a dealer, that was from an independent garage. And it didn't include diagnostics. I had to diagnose the problem myself because the problem only occurred on track in very specific circumstances that a mechanic cannot safely replicate on the road. I did get to the bottom of it though, and in this video I'm going to talk about what the symptoms were, what the problem turned out to be, how much I actually ended up spending, and whether or not I think track driving actually caused the problem. The symptom would occur after a right hairpin bend, only in the dry. In the wet, I didn't have enough grip to put enough force into the car to make this happen. I was getting the problem on Montreal, the corner called Montreal at Snetterton, and Rocket Out at Trackmon Racing Circuit in Anglesey. And the problem I would have is after the hairpin bend, is when I went to press the clutch down, there was like a clunk at the top of the pedal, and then it felt like I was actually disengaging the clutch. The first time it happened was in February 2024 at Snetterton, and I asked around some friends and some people, and many people thought it was a hydraulic issue. Now, I didn't think it was a hydraulic issue because I've had hydraulic issues and it didn't feel like that. It felt very clunky. That first little bit of the pedal was a noticeable clunk. But I bled the hydraulics thoroughly anyway, just to see what would happen. And the next track day I did, which was dry with a right hairpin bend, was October, November time at Anglesey, and it was still happening. And then I forgot about it until February this year, where I was at Anglesey in the dry, and it was happening badly, to the point where I had to put my foot under the pedal to lift it back up because the clutch pedal wasn't returning to the top after I had depressed it. On the road, absolutely no problems. In the wet, no problems. And every other corner, no problems. Right hairpin bends. After asking around as many mechanically minded people as I could, I wasn't getting anywhere. Everyone was saying it's going to be hydraulics. But for me, I've experienced the issue. I know what it feels like. It doesn't feel like hydraulics. So I'm thinking, what could this be? You've got the fork, you've got the release bearing, the pressure plate, the friction disc. What could be making this happen? And I was coming to the conclusion that I need to take the gearbox off to investigate. But then I thought, why not hunt around online for somebody who's had a similar issue? And I found someone on the MX5miata.net forum. The username is TexTick, and he had a similar issue, very similar. And it turned out he had axial play in the dual mass flywheel. I forgot about the flywheel. I was thinking about the clutch, the hydraulics and the clutch. What about the flywheel? And once I read that, it all clicked into place. It made sense. That explained the symptoms I was having. Here's a diagram to try and explain what was happening. The top diagram is clutch up and the bottom diagram is clutch down. As you can see by the bottom diagram, when you push the clutch pedal down, it pushes this master cylinder in, which forces fluid into the slave cylinder, which pushes the slave cylinder out, which pushes this purple thing, which is a clutch release bearing. It pushes that against the clutch pressure plate diaphragm fingers, these here. And as you push those fingers down, that actually lifts the clutch pressure plate up and frees up the friction disc of the clutch. That's how you disengage the clutch. So clutch up at the top, clutch down at the bottom. Now let's look at what happened to my dual mass flywheel. That's the green thing in this diagram. As you can see, the flywheel has moved towards the pedal, and as the pressure plate is bolted to the flywheel, the pressure plate has moved towards the pedal as well, which has pushed the slave cylinder towards the pedal. And as the pedal is already at the top of its travel, it can't go any higher. The fluid goes up into the reservoir. That's why the fluid in the reservoir here is higher than the one at the top. Now I'm going to explain the step. Why is there a step when I press the clutch pedal down? Bear in mind though that the clutch pedal is only going to force so much fluid into the slave cylinder. So if the slave cylinder is starting up here at the top and it moves forwards 10 centimeters to here, as the slave cylinder has been pushed back a bit at the bottom, on the bottom diagram, if it's still only going to move 10 centimeters, it's not going to finish as far as if it started from here and moved 10 centimeters. It's only going to move the same distance because the clutch pedal is only going to move the same distance. So let's look at the step. The top diagram shows the axial play in the flywheel and the slave cylinder being pushed back. The middle diagram shows what happens when I press the clutch pedal down. Half of the pedal travel is taken up by sandwiching the flywheel back together. So half of the pedal travel is being used to move the flywheel. And then the bottom diagram shows the second half of the pedal travel is used to press the clutch in. But because only half of the pedal travel is being used to press the clutch in, well, the clutch only goes halfway in, as you can see by these blue diaphragm fingers. They're nowhere near as in as much as they were before. Now let's look at why the clutch is not returning all the way to the top. The top diagram shows the clutch fully down and the clutch pressure plate fully depressed with the diaphragm fingers fully down, as they should be. But as I showed you earlier, due to axial play, by the time my clutch pedal is fully down, the diaphragm fingers are only about half down. Therefore, they're only going to push halfway back up because they're doing half the travel as they are in the top diagram. You see the top diagram, they've got a long way to go back to the top, whereas in the middle diagram, they haven't got far to go back to the top. Therefore, in the bottom diagram, you can see when they do spring back to the top, they only push the pedal halfway back. And that is why the pedal wasn't coming back to the top. So how did I get the pedal back to the top? Well, it's simple really. I put my foot under the clutch pedal and pull it up. That pulls the master cylinder back and allows hydraulic fluid to flow back into the master cylinder. The system is now reset and the car will drive exactly how it should. No problems at all until I take a very hard right hand bend again, accelerating hard out of that bend and move the flywheel out of place, which knocks everything else out of place, and therefore the whole problem starts again. Now it's true, I could be wrong because I couldn't see what was happening. It's within the bell housing of the gearbox, but this is what felt like was happening, and replacing the dual mass flywheel and clutch assembly has solved the issue. I've taken it to TrackMon in Anglesey on a warm, dry day, gone round rocket out that right hairpin bend as quickly as I can using all the grip available, and the clutch is now fine. Once the new flywheel was bolted up to the engine, you could get the same amount of axial play, the in-out play, as you could on the old flywheel, but it had to be bolted up to the engine so that I could get a good grip on it, lean on it and give it a good tug. So the new and the old flywheels actually have the same level of axial play in terms of how much they move. It's just that the old flywheel moved far more easily. The reason why I didn't mention this issue in my last update video about this car, even though I knew about the issue, was because I wanted to give you the solution as well as the problem. So I held on to it until I had figured it out and confirmed that it worked by taking the car on track with a right hairpin bend on a dry day to see if the problem had been solved. Shall we talk about money, how much this cost me? Well, my quote from an independent garage using only genuine parts, I need my phone for this, there's quite a few figures, was £2,834. All the prices I'm going to quote includes VAT. The garage wanted £600 to do the work, so the genuine parts were £2,234. And I was very happy with the garage. They did a great job. I looked underneath the car, they let me investigate whilst they was there so I could see what was going on, and I could see that they hadn't dented or damaged the underside of the car, the floor of the car, when taking the gearbox out, which many people do because the gearbox on this car is not easy to remove, which is why I didn't do it myself in a residential parking area. I thought just get a garage to do this one. I didn't fancy this job. But I was very happy with their work. Rally Sport Automotive is what they're called. They're not sponsoring me, but they're my local garage and I've been using them for about 10 years now. And as they know me and they know I bring the correct parts, I don't just bring something and it turns out to be wrong, I actually research it, they allowed me to source my own parts, and I managed to get all the genuine parts much cheaper than they could get them. I saved £835 in parts. One way I made that saving was on MX5 parts. They are an online seller of parts for MX5s, and some of their parts are genuine, and they managed to sell genuine parts for less money than I can get from the dealer. So I saved £47 with them, but I made a big saving by finding out that the dual mass flywheel is made by LUK, and I found out the part number and I managed to get an LUK flywheel from Motor Parts Direct for a huge saving, £480 that flywheel, instead of, I haven't got it written down here, but it was £1,200 and something from Mazda, that flywheel. But it was a £788 saving on the flywheel itself, and putting them side by side, they look exactly the same, but the one from Motor Parts Direct, which is an LUK part, didn't have a Mazda stamp on it. Now, could I have saved more money? Yes, I could have saved more money. I wanted to use genuine gear oil, and I wanted to use a 75W80, which is what Mazda say this car should take. And in my experience of using different gear oils, it's the only gear oil that makes this car feel the way it did when it was new. And I can't buy 2 litres. I had to buy 20 litres at £267. So I could have saved that. Well, I could have saved part of that and just spent 50 quid on some other high quality oil, but I know from experience it's not going to feel the same. And I replaced all the exhaust parts that were taken off, all the nuts and bolts and gaskets, not the actual exhaust, but the nuts and bolts and gaskets, and all of them came to £190. For example, the manifold gasket, that's 30 quid. Each bolt for the manifold is £5 thereabouts each. It all adds up. So I didn't have to do that, but I did for peace of mind. So if I didn't replace the exhaust parts and I didn't use the genuine oil by buying 20 litres of it, to be fair, I could sell some of that to some people. I've already sold 2.5 litres to somebody. It would have cost me £1,592. If I only did the flywheel, which I don't think is possible, because once you take the clutch off, I'm not sure if you can put it back on. Some people say you can't. The mechanic certainly didn't want to. But if you just replace the flywheel and the labour, it was £1,080. And by the way, the clutch was in excellent condition. Plenty of life left in it. The rivets, the most shallow rivet I can measure is 1.2 millimeters deep, which is interesting because the new clutch friction disc is 1.5 millimeters deep down to the rivet. So therefore, after 35,000 miles to the rivets, I've used 20% of the clutch friction material, which means in theory this clutch should be good for approximately 175,000 miles. The reason why the mechanic didn't want to reuse the old clutch, even though it was only 20% worn, was because it has a self-adjusting pressure plate, and he was worried that he would fit the clutch back to the car, put the gearbox back on, put it all back together, and it wouldn't work properly. So he was a bit worried about doing that, and I was of the attitude as well that I'd rather spend a bit more and make sure it works first time. Although a part of me wanted just to do the flywheel to make sure it definitely was that causing the issue. But I can't see how the release bearing or the pressure plate or the friction disc would have caused the issue that I was experiencing. Now I know I'm going to get some comments about the gear oil viscosity, because I've said 75W80, and if you look in the owner's manual it says use genuine oil. If you can't get the genuine oil, use an alternative 75W90, which made me, and I'm sure most people assume that means the genuine stuff is 75W90, but it doesn't really say that. It says use genuine or an alternative 75W90. The alternative is 75W90, but doesn't specify what the viscosity is of the genuine oil. And if you speak to Mazda UK and ask for the correct gear oil for this car, the part number they give you is for a 75W80. And that solved another issue I had with this car. Horrible gear changes when the gearbox was cold after changing the gear oil. I've had genuine gear oil in this car, the 75W80, genuine 75W90 and Miller's 75W90. Both 75W90s made this gearbox recalcitrant when it was cold. The first 20 minutes of driving was not pleasant. Having put 75W80, as Mazda recommends, in the gearbox, now the gearbox feels like it did when it was new. I'm not sure that driving on track has caused my dual mass flywheel to wear prematurely. I actually think driving on track is probably less harsh on the flywheel than driving on the road. Dual mass flywheels usually wear from low RPM driving where the engine's being laboured and it's shaking, or harsh gear changes or hard starts where you give loads of gas and lift the clutch up quickly to get a fast launch. Driving on track, yes, the flywheel may be spinning more quickly, but, well, at least I'm changing gears smoothly on track because I don't want to upset the balance of the car. And when I'm downshifting, I'm rev matching my downshifts. So I would say I'm less harsh on my flywheel when I'm driving on track than when I'm driving on the road. I have a suspicion that there are many owners of this car, the ND2 MX5 with the dual mass flywheel on the 2-litre engine, who have the same problem that I had, but they will never know because the problem isn't apparent on the road. On most track days, I didn't have a problem. It had to be the right conditions, a dry day and a very sharp right-hand hairpin bend, the sort where I have a lot of confidence to use all the grip, get the car really loaded over to one side, probably pulling about a G in the corner before I would notice any problem. However, even though I think it's probably just general mileage that's making the flywheel weaker, not track driving, you could argue that track driving is the problem, because if I was just driving the car on the road, I would never know there's a problem. But even though track driving may not be making the flywheel weaker, track driving is making the weakness in the flywheel apparent. So you could say, well, track driving is actually the cause of the issue there, because if you weren't driving on track, you wouldn't have an issue. For the last 6 months and 2 track days, I've been using these Michelin Pilot Sport 5 tyres. Michelin are not sponsoring this video, but they have given me these tyres to review for me to give you my honest opinion, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Before I had these tyres, I had the Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tyres, which impressed me, and overall these have impressed me more. Firstly, they try to improve road wear. They want the tyres to last longer. I can't comment on that because if I was just to use these tyres on the road, it's going to take me years to wear them out. But Decra did a test comparing these tyres to Continental, Pirelli, Bridgestone and Goodyear, and these tyres did last longer, quite a bit longer. What about subjective performance though? How am I feeling these tyres are when it comes to handling? Well, in the dry they seem a bit better than the Pilot Sport 4. Bit better acceleration, bit better braking, quite a bit better when it comes to confidence, stability and predictability. They've made more of a significant improvement in that area. Where they've really improved is in the wet. I can accelerate significantly quicker with these tyres in the wet than I could with the Pilot Sport 4. In fact, these surprise me. Also, they have a nice rim protection there to protect your alloy wheels. And, at least in my opinion, it has one of the best looking sidewalls of any tyre. It enhances the look of the car. What about track driving though? Well, Michelin said these tyres are 100% road tyres. But if you like, take them on track and give us your feedback. and they've been two of the most enjoyable track days I've ever done. And it's simply because of confidence, stability and predictability. I find track days fun when I can get the car on the limit of traction, on the edge of grip. And these tyres allow me to do that with confidence because they're predictable. I can get the car on the edge of grip where it's starting to slide and handle it without being scared. They're road tyres, so they do start to overheat after a few laps, but they only ever start to overheat. The performance doesn't drop off significantly at any stage. In fact, I've stayed out on more than one occasion for a whole hour on these tyres without a significant drop in performance. One area where these tyres aren't as good as the Pilot Sport 4s is how quickly they wear on track. It seems that in trying to make these tyres last longer on the road, they don't last as long on track. Bear in mind, I haven't done any wet track days on these tyres. I've only driven them on dry track days where I've got them really hot. The Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tyres, they lasted me 1,706 miles on track. And I think I'm going to be lucky to get 500 miles out of these tyres on track. But to be fair to Michelin, they have said these are a 100% road tyre. If you want good track performance, you should be looking at the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. So if you have a road car and you're looking for a summer tyre that gives you sharp, accurate performance with confidence, I can confidently recommend these Michelin Pilot Sport 5 tyres. But if you're going to be driving on track, I recommend looking at a tyre that is more track orientated. And that brings me on to the ownership of this car. Do you think this car is actually suitable for me, or do you think I'm asking too much from it? My fantasy from a car like this is the ability to drive hours and hours and hours away in comfort, then drive the pants off it round a race circuit or enjoy some mountain roads, and then drive it home with confidence that it's not going to break down. So far, this car has fulfilled that fantasy, and as a result, I've had plenty of track hours and it's helped me improve my skill. But it hasn't been for free. It's come with two significant costs. One is I bought it new. That's gone a long way towards the reliability of this car because it's new and fresh. But then that's not for free. That's a significant cost, the depreciation. But at least I can plan for that. I know how much it's costing me. And the other significant bill is the dual mass flywheel. Do you think I'd be better off with a different car? Maybe a Porsche Boxster? Is that better suited to how I drive the car? I don't need a faster car. A car maybe that had more grip round track. You know what? I don't need that either. I just want it to be something like this and not give me big bills. Do you think this is the best car for me? Well, I'm not sure, but what I do know is my heart tells me, pay the bill and enjoy it. Well, if only things were as simple as what our hearts wanted. If you found the video interesting, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to get my future videos, and until the next one, cheerio.